This has been a terrible Sunday for Donald Trump, but frankly for the entire United States, as we're seeing the ramifications of Donald Trump's military strikes in Iran, where he and Netanyahu essentially went it alone. We're learning that the Fordow nuclear site was not even entirely destroyed. It appears to have been damaged, but again, not entirely destroyed, which was the central mission, which does not seem to have been a success. We're also now learning that, here's the response from Iran's ministers. America must receive a response for their aggression. This was on a call between Iran's top leaders and France. The United States is now ordering family and non-emergency government personnel to leave Lebanon immediately. Our top threat assessment within the United States government is that the United States now faces a heightened terrorism threat as a result. The Iranian foreign minister, Araghchi, is planning on visiting Moscow on Monday to meet with Vladimir Putin. This was reported by NBC First. He said he plans to travel to Moscow on Monday to meet with Putin to discuss how they can be jointly responding to the United States attack on the nuclear sites. China has issued a statement strongly condemning the United States attacks on Iran and bombing of nuclear facilities. The actions of the U.S. seriously violate the purposes and principles of the UN Charter and international law. That's what China put out in a statement. It was originally reported also that Iran's parliament has approved the closing of the Hormuz Strait. That's where all of the oil tankers have to pass through when they're traveling with all of the oil, all of it, from the Middle East. You shut down the Hormuz Strait, the Strait of Hormuz, and oil becomes essentially inaccessible and unaffordable in the United States. It was reported that the top security body in Iran is now making the final call after Parliament approved it. There was then a wrinkle on that it wasn't a formal approval by the Parliament, but they gave unanimous consent to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, but the decision now lies with the Supreme National Council in terms of how they intend to retaliate. Here is a statement, formal statement issued by Iran's foreign minister, Saeed Araghchi. Says the following: last week we were in negotiations with the U.S. when Israel decided to blow up that diplomacy. This week we held talks with the E3 and EU when the U.S. decided to blow up that diplomacy. What conclusion would you draw? To Britain and the EU high rep, it is Iran which must, quote, return to the table. But how can Iran return to something it never left, let alone blew up? Here's what we're hearing from as well from Russia. Russia's former president and prime minister Medvedev put out the following statement. What did the Americans achieve with their night strike on 3 points in Iran? Critical infrastructure of the nuclear cycle in Iran appears to have suffered little or no damage. Enrichment of nuclear materials, and now we can say directly, and future production of nuclear weapons will continue. A number of countries are ready to directly supply Iran with their nuclear weapons. Israel is under attack. Explosions are thundering people in panic. The U.S. is now drawn into a new conflict with the prospect of ground operations. That's coming from Russia's former president and prime minister, Medvedev. Moments ago, you had United States Vice President J.D. Vance. He was on the morning shows and he was asked, what's the difference between Donald Trump starting or being embroiled now in a war with Iran versus everything you, J.D. Vance, and Donald Trump had been saying before, that it's the stupidest thing in the world to do. It would take the dumbest person. Only the stupidest negotiators would ever get into a war in Iran. This is part of the neocon establishment. And here, J.D. Vance this morning says, I empathize with Americans who are tired of 25 years of foreign entanglements, but now we've got Donald Trump, who's a genius And before we had stupid presidents. So now we have the greatest president, but then we had dumb presidents. So that's the difference. He actually used those words, basically. You can hear him for yourself. I paraphrased a little bit, but he basically said that. So let's play that clip.
And the second thing is, Kristen, I certainly empathize with Americans who are exhausted after 25 years of foreign entanglements in the Middle East. I understand the concern, but the difference is that back then we had dumb presidents, and now we have a president who actually knows how to accomplish America's national security objectives. So this is not going to be some long drawn out thing. We've got in, we've done the job of setting their nuclear program back. We're going to now work to permanently dismantle that nuclear program over the coming years, and that is what the president has set out to do. Simple.
I think it's also important that we know some of the other geopolitical ramifications and things that are taking place. It's why the research tools that I use, I want to focus on what's left media covering, what's right-wing media covering, what's center media covering, because even when stories like this are reported, the right-wing media never talks about it. A confidential brief to the ICC, International Criminal Courts, accuses Russia-linked Wagner of promoting atrocities in the West. How Russian media and right-wing media is interlinked with Russian media and right-wing media here in the United States as well. Here's a story that I think is being underreported, how a lot of the top people in the United States military worked for Palantir, the AI company that's gaining access to all of your personal data and compiling a list of everybody in the United States for Donald Trump. Meta and OpenAI, these corporations. Remember all those people sitting kind of front row during the inauguration? A lot of the people who work there are now basically at top positions now in the military as well. Just the research tool that I use, so you know, because I get asked it all the time, I might as well tell you here. It's called Ground News. It's essential for me to see where the bias lies and try to correct for it. If you want to use the research tool that I use, go to ground.news/MTN or scan the QR code right there. We're going to give our viewers 40% off of Ground News top tier Vantage plan. Use the tools I use. Again, it's also subscriber funded. They don't rely on ads that could introduce bias, and subscribing supports our independent media network as well. Ground.news/MTN or scan the QR code and get that 40% off. As I was noting before, that's what J.D. Vance was saying in this morning. Here's what Pete Hegseth had to say this morning as well. He held a press conference earlier, and it was just basically praising Donald Trump for everything. Oh, this was the greatest. This was the greatest thing ever. Here's what Hegseth had to say.
I want to give congratulations to our commander-in-chief. It was an honor to watch him lead last night and throughout, and to our great American warriors on this successful operation. God bless our troops. God bless America, and we give glory to God for his providence and continue to ask for his protection.
Hegseth was then asked if there's a possibility that Iran, North Korea, and other forces such as China are now going to join forces with Iran and retaliate. Does Iran, North Korea, China all join forces? Hegseth's response is to blame former President Biden. Play this clip.
Iran and North Korea are cooperating on nuclear and missile development. Do you think there is a possibility that Iran, North Korea, and the other forces, such as China, will join forces to retaliate against the United States?
Well, unfortunately, because of the policies under the previous administration, we drove those countries together, and ultimately that creates a challenging environment. For this particular operation, the focus is on Iran and Iranian nuclear capabilities. That's our focus here, is to not just say that they can't have, but President Trump has said from over 20 years, frankly, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And ultimately, he decided this is the moment, given their stonewalling, when direct military action had to be taken to prevent that from happening.
Also, during the press conference this morning, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs was asked, do you believe that some nuclear ability remains? And he says that they don't have all that information yet. But as we now know, the Fordo facility does not seem to be fully destroyed, which is a big problem. And it seems that the United States government once again lied to us yesterday the same way they've always, Trump has been lying to us. And when you had Tulsi Gabbard say 90 days ago that Iran was not capable of making a nuclear weapon. But anyway, here's what the reporter asks. Do you believe some nuclear ability in Iran remains? Here's what they say. Play this clip.
Me? Yeah. So is regime change off the table, Mr. Secretary? And to the chairman, you said the battle damage assessment is still ongoing, but do you believe that some nuclear capability in Iran remains?
This mission was not and has not been about regime change. The president authorized a precision operation to neutralize the threats to our national interests posed by the Iranian nuclear program and the collective self-defense of our troops and our ally Israel.
Thanks for your question. I think BDA is still pending, and it would be way too early for me to comment on what may or may not still be there. But thanks for the question.
So then you have J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio, Secretary of State Rubio and Vice President Vance. They were going on TV, and they're pretending like we're not in a war with Iran right now. And again, just how weak and pathetic do they look? I mean, y'all took B-2 bombers and hit Iran's sites. You didn't destroy it. And now you want to pretend that we're not at war and that it's just a one and done and everything's okay, everybody. For real, this is what they were saying this morning. Here you have Kristen Welker asking J.D. Vance, is the United States now at war with Iran? And he says no. Well, you may want to ask the Iranians what they think. Here, play this clip.
Question, Mr. Vice President, is the United States now at war with Iran?
No, Kristen, we're not at war with Iran. We're at war with Iran's nuclear program. And let me just say, Kristen, that we're incredibly grateful and proud of the American Air Force pilots who did an incredible job last night.
And then Maria Bartiromo on Fox asks Rubio, and Rubio says no. Again, you may want to ask Iran what they think about that. Play this clip.
Now at war with Iran.
No, we're not. This is not a war against Iran. This is very simple. 67 days ago, the President of the United States sent the Iranians a letter, and it said, you're not going to have nuclear weapons. You're not going to have a militarized nuclear program. Let's negotiate. I want to do this diplomatically. I want to do this peacefully. They tried to play him along the way they've played every American president for the last 35 years. And, the president told them, if we don't get a deal, which is what he wanted, then I'll have to handle it differently. And that's what he did last night. He handled it differently. But that was an Iranian choice. We didn't make that choice. They did. By playing games with Donald Trump, they made a huge mistake. And President Trump acted last night. And I think the world today is safer and more stable than it was 24 hours ago. And a bunch of these countries putting out statements condemning us, privately, they all agree with us that this needed to be done. They got to do what they got to do for, their own public relations purposes. But the only people in the world that are unhappy about what happened in Iran last night is the regime in Iran.
So what has Donald Trump been doing? Well, before these strikes took place, he was at his golf club in Bedminster posing with thumbs up for the new members of Bedminster and the family members of Bedminster, new members. Patriot Takes Account found this photo. There it is, a photo surfaced of Trump this weekend wearing his golf clothes at Bedminster after military personnel were being deployed to the Middle East. That's how he was spending his time there. Also, you have Donald Trump posting the following this morning: great unity in the Republican Party, perhaps unity like we've never seen before. Now let's get the great, big, beautiful bill done. Our country is great. MAGA exclamation point. So he's like, all right, we're done. Well, I've moved on. I moved on to the next topic. Sure, I've lit the whole Middle East on fire, joined a war, but can we talk about the disastrous budget bill that's going to take healthcare away from 15 million Americans now and give trillions of dollars in tax cuts to billionaires and screw over working class and hardworking people and take away food stamps and housing and attack women reproductive rights and take away infrastructure jobs? Yeah, I've moved on. I'm done talking about it. And by the way, now as the threat of domestic terrorism, of terrorism rather, in the United States has increased significantly. Of course, domestic terrorism, but terrorism from abroad inside the United States increases. This is the guy who's in charge of the counterterrorism at the Department of Homeland Security. And as Chris Murphy says, as our nation girds for possible Iranian terrorist attacks, this is the person Trump has put to head the counterterrorism. A 22-year-old who was working in landscaping, and he was a grocery clerk, but he was a big MAGA fan. So he got the job to be the 22-year-old kid, got the job to be the top of the head of counterterrorism with no prior experience. Oh, also, J.D. Vance admitted when he was asked, when did Trump make the decision to strike? J.D. Vance said no one really knew when. No one had any clue. He just did it whenever. Play this clip.
Vice President, when did President Trump exactly make this decision, and did he coordinate with Israel?
The president, honestly, Kristen, I don't know that any of us knew exactly when the president made the decision, except for the president himself. But if you back up a little bit, we engage in this diplomatic process. I think that he decided probably by mid-May that this process was not going anywhere. And so he decided to issue some private ultimatums to the Iranians. And then eventually, of course, we decided to destroy the Fordo nuclear facility and some of these other facilities ourselves.
Well, that's what we're learning this morning. We'll keep you posted, updated with more information. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 6 million subscribers.
New Meidas merch drop. Check out the latest pro-democracy sticker packs, t-shirts, hats, sweatshirts, and more. All at store.MeidasTouch.com.